there's interest pretty much anywhere in the world now. There's a few exceptions, but surprisingly, it's really broad now. And I think that from here on is where the global, I use this term a lot, but the shift in the global food paradigm will take place over the next few years. And that doesn't mean people will stop eating meat or fish or dairy. But what it means to me is that the go-to cuisine, what we think of as our staple, and that includes restaurants and homes and so forth, will be plants.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we are talking to you from two totally different places. I love technology. I'm here in New Mexico with our baby Kai. I switched out Sophie after a couple of weeks, but through the miracle of Zoom, which we've all been using like crazy people for the last 6-7 months, we get to do this. How are you, babe?
I'm good. I miss you. I'm at home holding down the fort with Noah and Leo. It feels so weird to be home because it's been so long, but also just feels great to be here. And I'm so excited for this episode. I have been a fan of Matthew Kenney. I've worked with him on and off for the last, I'd say 15 years. And he is one of my biggest inspirations when it comes to plant-based eating, raw food specifically, but really just plant-based, creative, beautiful art in the form of food. And it's just such an honor to have him on our podcast. This is a long time coming, and Adi knows my love affair with his work and his food and his books that he's written. And we just really get into the nitty-gritty, his struggle, like where he came from, where he started, the years and years and years of like real putting in the work and not knowing what was going to be on the other side. And he just believing just in himself. So I love this episode. I'm so excited to share it with all of you. And first, we want to start with our review of the week.
Yeah, man, you definitely have a man crush. You just went for like 3 minutes. I've never seen you do this before.
I love him. You know that.
Matthew, you do not come after my girl. I will. You're a great guy, but I will take you down. We got a review of the week, but I'm over here, so I can't find the drums. Do you know where they are, babe?
Oh, let me look. Oh, yeah.
Wow. I love this episode is fun remotely like this. What I Needed from Lauren Frederick. Sophie and Adi bring a whole new light of transparency and acceptance through their podcast. The topics hit my heart as I listen to them and apply them to my life right when I need them. Sophie is one of my biggest inspirations as a young woman, and I admire her love for dancing and the gray parts of life. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Adi and Sophie. I love you both. We love you so much. And I love her talking about the dancing with the gray, right? You always talk about not really going for the extremes. We're going to talk about that a little bit when it comes to food. So thank you so much, Lauren. Do not forget to find us Instagram, Facebook, send us a carrier pigeon, and we will send you a Ignited and Philosophy care package.
Woohoo! Yeah, so anyone that maybe is listening for the first time or hasn't done it yet, you have the opportunity to potentially win an amazing care package from Ignited and Philosophy, my superfood product line. And all you have to do is leave a review and just say why you love our podcast. If we read it on air, then you will win.
Yeah, you will. All right. Babe, you have a quote for us?
I do. So this quote is from Jaya John from his book, Freedom, Medicine Words for Your Brave Revolution. Your feelings don't arrive to harm you. They arrive to lead you back to you. Follow them. They know the way home.
I love that. I love it. There's so many ways that this applies, from Matthew's intuition, right, about food, to all the stuff that we talk about, to the cheating and the struggles we've had in our relationship, and the idea that instead of running away from your feelings, go after them, find them, identify them, answer them, right? Really kind of be part of the experience. Don't try to run away from them or push them away.
Yeah, I think just really, the essence of who we are and how we try and share with you and the world is like your feelings, your intuition, like all of it matters. And you need to learn how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Like a lot of the growth that we had in our relationship and as individuals was because we had to sit in our own feelings and a lot of it was discomfort. And that is where the growth occurs, whether it be in relationship with someone else or if it's following your dreams and continuing to listen to that ping inside and that inner knowing that this is the right path for me. And that's what Matthew Kenney kept doing. You'll hear this later in the episode. He just kept going. Even when people were laughing at him, thought he was crazy, having a raw restaurant in New York City in the winter, like he just did it. And he followed the feelings and followed that gut instinct. And that was just an inner knowing. No one told him like, this is going to be easy and it wasn't easy. And, and that passion is what has kept me coming back. It's that same passion is why Kai and I went several times to take a cooking class with him, on Abbott Kinney. He has the most incredible, if you've never been in Los Angeles, I highly recommend one of my favorite places, our favorite places, a romantic place to eat is called Plant Food and Wine. And it's on Abbott Kinney. There's outdoor seating. It's absolutely lovely. It's all plant-based. There is some cooked food and it's delicious. He also has a pizza place in Venice, which is so creative. He has gluten-free. He has really like wonderful ancient green crust for people that like still eat gluten and it's all vegan, but it tastes so good. And that's called Double Zero. I just am so impressed with him and I can't wait to share him with all of you.
Yeah. I mean, what I love about Matthew's work is he took this sort of like high-end chef world and he made it really, really approachable. So for people like me, I came from, I ate pretty trashy before you and I met, that, but, and gradually through knowing you and us then living together and then married and kids, et cetera, I've definitely transitioned to where I probably eat 2 to 3 times as much plant food now as I used to. I still eat protein, meat and things of that nature, but I definitely eat a lot more of it. But what I love about eating at Matthew's place is it's not just that you don't feel deprived. He does these really amazing things with the food where you feel like you're having a food experience. It just happens to be plant-based. And when he talks about that in this episode, because he says that was kind of one of his original goals. And so, you go to a pizza place and you're not bothered that it's this, it belongs in a different food category. It's like, Kai wants to eat French onion soup and we end up going to a French restaurant. This is like a plant-based restaurant is kind of Matthew's concept. And you mentioned how there was nobody else who had a path. I've literally since recording this episode, I've had a couple of phone calls with Matthew because what he's been able to achieve by literally creating a different category of eating is incredible. The guy's got like 40 or 50 different restaurants that he's aligned with or has created menus for or are branded him around the world. And this is in a category that I would argue most Americans don't even know exists yet. And so he's had this massive success. And you listen to him. One of the things I love, and you guys listen to this because, I talk so much about purpose and knowing where you're going, et cetera. And if you listen to this guy talk and that he saw this before it ever happened, and talk about trusting your intuition and your gut and going in a direction that other people might think is crazy. Matthew's an amazing example of that.
Yeah. So whether or not you eat a lot of plant-based foods or you care about veganism, anything, it doesn't matter. This is inspiring for anyone, whether or not it's feeling that inspirational tug about your career, about trying something different, about abandoning everything that you've ever known and trusting your own path. This is for you. And I hope that you'll share this with your friends and your loved ones and anyone that you think might be inspired by it. And be sure to tag us and let us know what you're inspired by.
Absolutely. Here's a little break and we'll see you on the other side.
This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fixes all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thefilosophy.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the non-fire fireside chat part of our little shindig here. We've got a really special guest in house today. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you.
I learned everything I know about you in one of our first apartments with one of Sophie's first raw vegan cookbooks. So I'm actually going to let Sophie introduce you because she knows so much about your journey.
Well, I'm going to let Matthew introduce himself, but what I will say is, Matthew, you have influenced a lot of my path in being an entrepreneur, falling in love with plant-based foods. Plant-based foods being something that is not about, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to me it's not about being vegan. It's about embracing and indulging in the most beautiful foods on earth and a wide array of colors and flavors and being so creative. It's not just about eating vegetables. It is eating vegetables, but it's in creative, beautiful, delicious ways and really transforming my own health and those of so many others. But for me personally, I feel like I'm reverse aging. Truly, I think I'm reverse aging, and I owe a lot of that to superfoods, raw foods, and these vibrant, colorful foods. So thank you for your influence and for all the classes I've taken with you. And I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Great. Yeah, I remember we when we met in Santa Monica. That was our first venture in California.
Long time ago.
Well, I'm a chef by training, but my job is really to help navigate the narrative of our brand, Matthew Kenney Cuisine, and we're involved in projects in a number of different directions. But I started out as a classically trained chef, and like you said, I got to a point where the best food in the world to me happened to be plant-based. It wasn't just going plant-based because of health or because of the environment, all those reasons, of course. But as a chef, wearing my professional hat, I did it because it was the most exciting cuisine. It was the most flavorful cuisine. And it was really the first time in my life that I could truly enjoy food, even though I always loved food, decadent food and high-end restaurants. Didn't always love the way I felt the next day or the next 2 days, and having to dine one way this day and another way the next day. With plant-based food, you can indulge every single day. And it's just much more consistent. And I think when you reference the aging process, not putting our body through that trauma of trying to recover from something that's not good for us is just giving our physical being a tremendous break. And it manifests in, like you said, reverse aging, hopefully, or at least slowing it down.
Slowing it down, yeah.
I love it. So you said you started out as a classically trained chef, and the transition was around the impact the foods had on you and what you were finding in the plant-based sort of lifestyle. When was this? Is this in New York?
In New York. I went to culinary school in '89. I can't count how long ago that is. And graduated, and within a couple of years, actually opened my first restaurant. My impetus for going to school was to learn about the back of house. I just wanted to understand how kitchens worked because I had this dream of opening my own restaurant in New York. Not really being a chef, but I got there to French cooking school, and I was already into health food. I'd been into the Pritikin diet and healthy diets all through college, and was really into sports and staying athletic. But I also loved going to restaurants. And so after this culinary school, I discovered that I had this passion for cooking. It came very easily to me, and I went and worked in a French restaurant. And while I love the technique and the pace and the speed of working in restaurants, didn't always love adding 20 pounds of butter to a sauce, and the reductions and the heaviness of it. So I started to experiment more with the Mediterranean diet, which in the early 90s was probably the healthiest way to eat. We weren't looking at plant-based foods as a healthy diet. It was an alternative diet, but it wasn't what athletes were using for performance or recovery at all. It was more of a fringe type of movement in terms of restaurants. And so for the first 10 years of my career, I was focused on mostly clean Mediterranean style cuisine. And during those years, started to pay a lot more attention to how food made me feel, how connected it was, how connected I was to the planet or not, and also began doing a lot of yoga. And that's really what kind of pushed me more and more toward plant-based. For 3 years before I ever went plant-based, I would tell friends I could see myself being a vegetarian. Everybody thought that's crazy because your menus have 5 fish and 5 meat dishes, and there's no vegan dish on your menu. But I felt it. So it was just a long, slow journey. And then around 2001, 2002, I had a moment where I took an entirely different direction.
Yeah. I want to hear more about that. I personally, I want to just preface this to anyone that's listening. Like, Adi and I are not 100% of anything. I personally, my journey has been all over the place. I was a vegan, totally vegan for 7 years, from 20 to 26-ish, and started eating other things other than a vegan diet when I was 26 and pregnant with our first child, Kai. And I want to share that because I know that when I was lost many times in my eating, working out, healthy, striving to be healthy and feel good, that I would listen to things like this or read articles, and it would kind of feel absolutist. And that isn't what works for me. For me, it's very much about moderation, but not having rules, because that actually makes me feel a little suffocated. And then I want to break the rules just because there's a rule in place. And to me, it's about saturating my body with the most beautiful nutrients on earth as often as possible. And that helps balance any of the indulgences like real ice cream or real pizza or whatever it is that I'm craving in the moment, and tuning into that place of like, what is it that I am craving? And sometimes it's not the pizza, it's comfort. Sometimes it's physical affection. Sometimes it's something else. But just want to preface that and explain that in case you haven't followed my journey, that there's a place for everyone along the path, and that you have inspired me to lean in and also bring people that don't even know what plant-based diets are. I bring everyone to your restaurants to have business meetings, or if they're here in LA visiting, because I feel like what you offer is something for everyone. And just wanted to let everyone know that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the majority of our guests in our restaurants are not plant-based in terms of like, they're not they're not full-time plant-based. And that's, that was the whole idea behind the way we cook and approach food. We wanted to make it a cuisine, just like you may go to a Japanese restaurant one night and you may go to, I may not, but somebody else may go to a steakhouse another night. Plant-based is a relevant cuisine, and I think it's really the most exciting cuisine there is. So we never really think about it in that absolutist way. I personally have, for the most of the last 18 years been plant-based, but there were times where I would incorporate some other things and see how that felt as well.
Yeah, I think, you said it, and you were very diplomatic about it, but, in the late 80s, early 90s, the word vegan, I remember like there would be these rumors about these celebrities that didn't eat meat, or these rumors about these, these people who only ate raw. Like raw was completely insane. If, raw was so fringe at that time. I literally remember there would be like news stories about celebrities, and it would be this oddity. And so you were saying that right around in the early 90s is when you kind of decided to go all in and make the switch. I'd love to just like, what drove you to do that at a time where, like you said, definitely an alternative diet, but this idea to just jump all in, dive all in. And again, we've been to your restaurants and we've eaten the food, and I think it's easy to, you can order a cheese plate at your Venice restaurant and not know, if nobody tells you, you wouldn't necessarily even know that you're not eating cheese. And so definitely today I want to get partially into how you're training and how the work that you've done and the techniques you've done and all this stuff have made it, I think that's such a beautiful way of saying it, like a culinary style. We don't think twice before we go to different types. We'll go to Italian, we'll go to a steakhouse, and we'll go to a sushi restaurant or Mediterranean restaurant, and those we totally accept. So the idea of making it just simpler and just saying, this is one of the options on your menu. You don't have to go all in or not at all.
Yeah, and it was the late 90s when I started veering away from veering toward plant-based foods, but not wholly. And it was early 2000s when a friend who he was a good friend, and I was still, really I was in a transitional period of my career after 9/11 and planning a new restaurant, a French Moroccan restaurant. And my friend invited me to dinner, and I made a reservation at a place called 66, which was a contemporary Chinese restaurant that John George had opened. It was kind of the hot restaurant in New York. And got a reservation, and then my friend called in this very deliberate voice, because he was a very extreme person. If it was windsurfing, he'd windsurf every day for a year and move to the place where the best wind is. So he informed me that he was only eating raw food, and I didn't really know what that was. I'd heard about it a little bit. I think there maybe was an article about Giuliano or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Giuliano, throwback.
Giuliano.
I haven't seen him for a while. But so he took me to this restaurant called Quintessence, and I reluctantly agreed to go. And it was actually on the street that I lived at. I lived on 10th Street and 4th Avenue, and this was on 10th between A and B. So it was 3 blocks from my house.
Wow.
And I'd never heard of it. And I'd lived there for 3 years, walked around the neighborhood constantly, and just never noticed. It was one of those little East Village, hole in the walls. And we went in, and the food had all these weird names. Like I remember the first dish was called Peter's Pot, and it was like this witch's brew of something. I don't know. It was very weird stuff. Place didn't have any music. The lights were really bright. But it was a Monday night, and it was full of all these people that were like glowing, and they were the raw foodists in the late 90s, early 2000s. Like they were so extreme that it showed in their eyes and their skin. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. And unlike most meals, if I'd gone to 66, I would have probably gone home and been exhausted. But I was so energized, I walked around the city for a couple hours and just started to think about it more deeply. And it was one of two maybe light bulb moments that I've had where I considered that if somebody could make this food cool and modern, that it could be one of the most, one of the quickest growing, not trends, but one of the quickest growing segments in the culinary market, bringing food and health together. So on a whim, I just went to the partner that we were going to open the French Moroccan restaurant with and said, I'd like to open a raw vegan restaurant. And he, oddly enough, was open to it. And so that's how it started. And then we started looking for space and started building Pure Food and Wine and experimenting. I mean, I had dehydrators and, all these experiments going on in my house. And there were no high-end cookbooks in those days. There were a couple of odd cookbooks, old school. There was a German medical professional who had been using a raw food diet to cure disease, but there wasn't really anything showing you how to make a kimchi dumpling or cashew mozzarella. None of that it really existed at this time. There was Roxanne Klein. She was doing some work for a short period of time in Larkspur in Northern California, but I never made it to her restaurant, and her book hadn't come out at this time. So we were working in the dark, and it took a long time to even make one dish that was good. Like the first few dishes I made didn't know it's just the skills you have don't apply to plant-based cuisine. I mean, we've worked now over 15 years to find a way to apply them, and we've taken all the classical techniques and sort of modified them to fit plant-based and plant-based ingredients. But in those days, we were just starting from scratch. There was nothing to work from.
I remember Sophie taking me to Pure Food and Wine. My family lived in New York at the time. I'd never heard of raw food in my life. Like it was nowhere near.
And it was a trek. Like I was like, let's go.
Well, it was down by Union Square. I was like over there.
Yeah, 17th and Irving.
Yeah. So for anybody who hasn't been in New York, it's like one of the most lively areas of New York. New York's already a huge culinary city. Restaurants everywhere, life. It's like so bustling and so energetic. And the restaurant looked like a French bistro. I mean, it looked like you were walking into a high-end restaurant. There were no, because since then we've been to Giuliano's, and at the time when you're talking, Giuliano was doing like back alley, like garage dinners, because that's what raw food was at the time. But when we walked in, and this is later after you guys had opened, you felt like you were sitting in a 5-star restaurant. It was kind of this feel, and this is something I feel like is unique to your approach to this in general.
I agree.
To not give into this idea that because you're eating raw or because you're eating vegan, here's like sliced carrots and like some
food.
raw kale
granola
massaged with some like lime. Right? I don't feel like that's ever been the approach. You were always trying to kind of combine these techniques and give people foods they're excited about and that look like something they might get
and
in
taste
some
delicious.
high-end restaurant and just taste amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, presentation's always been important, especially with the rise of social media. It's really been a big boon to plant-based food, because if you put a raw lasagna next to a piece of grilled chicken, the lasagna wins if it's in an Instagram post. So it's really made a big difference. So presentation's always been a priority, and ambiance in the restaurants. Looking back in those days, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I knew enough to make something elevated, to create an elevated experience, but we had such a limited repertoire of techniques and ideas back then compared to now. But it was at the time, it was nice.
You fulfilled our needs. I felt like we got everything we needed from it, even though it was much more simplified. It was everything we needed from a date night and from a nice meal out. We had, dessert as always. Dessert, I always say, is like the gateway for raw food.
I was going to say dessert. Yeah, I would say our desserts were ahead of everything else at that time.
Yeah.
Well, raw dessert is the thing. You can take anybody who likes normal food, whatever you want to put in those quotes, those air quotes for normal, and take them to a raw or a vegan restaurant. Give them some amazing like raw tiramisu or something like that, and they will just go whatever this is. We literally had that happen in this house multiple times. We were like, this is not. There's no way this is vegan. There's no way this is raw. So it's pretty amazing. Yeah. You said before we started recording, and I don't want to miss this because it's I think it's such an important part of the story. It's really nice to now have the celebration and like, hey, look at, what is it? Almost 40 restaurants? 40 restaurants in multiple countries, all this amazing stuff, 13 cookbooks. But you said this before we recorded. You said, man, the journey was amazing. I would probably do everything again, but I don't want to go through it again. So we've hit on some beautiful highlights, but now you've got this restaurant. And I only really know your story from that restaurant on. But I know that there are some parts when you're saying like I would want to go through it again. You've had a lot of tests and tribulations. I don't think when somebody thinks of a vegan or raw chef, they think of the life that you've lived to get from Pure Food and Wine in New York to where you are right now.
Yeah, and a little before, even getting to that point, I had restaurants that we had armed robberies in New York. One night, our night porter was tied up with duct tape on the floor and the safe was missing. He was fine. We've had floods. I had a restaurant that had a fire. We lost everything. I mean, we got, thankfully good insurance coverage, but
oh my God.
But even after that, even Pure Food and Wine, yes, it was beautiful out in the garden, but everybody thinks back and they think Pure Food and Wine, beautiful garden sitting out there under the trees. What they don't see is that after summer was over, that first year we opened, we would serve only 4 or 5 people a night some nights when it was snowing because nobody wanted raw food and they didn't associate it with. Now we realize we don't need hot food to warm our bodies, but the stigma existed then. And the first year it was losing a lot of money and it was always on the verge of not quite making it, but eventually it came around after about a year. But then, the next 10 years were, at least 10 years was often a struggle to stay alive in terms of business. We opened something in Oklahoma and it had an education component and it had a restaurant, and the education component did great. The restaurant did not the right city for raw food in 2009. And even opening in California, landlords in the beginning in 2011, when I moved out here, landlords were not really interested in renting an A location to a raw vegan restaurant or a vegan restaurant.
Oh, really?
So our first restaurant, as Sophie remembers, was on the 3rd floor of a mall in a part of the mall that was pretty much dead, dying.
This is a Santa Monica place?
Yeah, I feel like that you kind of brought some life. I feel like your presence brought some life to that mall. You were too early probably, but I feel like that was called Make.
Make,
yeah. And then that
It was
brought
in the back of that food court.
and then it brought gourmandise. I feel like that brought gourmandise school. No,
I think they were about the same time as us, but yeah,
it became like lively, like a cute little food court, and then you pieced out and went somewhere else.
Yeah, we did okay there, but we struggled. I mean, there wasn't much foot traffic, and stores started closing. The day we opened that restaurant, 2 major tenants announced they were closing. 2 of the big restaurants on that upper deck. And eventually they all closed, and now it's just Cheesecake Factory and one other Curious
Some, like,
Palate
Mexican food place with a bar in the back. It's like the only, it's that
bad.
food court with, it's so, this is the reason I want to really talk about it is one of the things that I've made almost like a mission to make sure we always discuss is the route to greatness. I mean, we're talking about what everybody would look at now and would go, wow, look at the success. And it's really easy to discount 20 years of just putting one foot in front of the other, sitting there when there's 4 people at your restaurant in a day in New York, which, I don't know if anybody knows this, but New York's an expensive place. So it's not like you were getting a break on rent because the restaurants wasn't working. And then like showing up day after day and going, okay, what's working, what's not working? How do we adjust? How do we keep showing up in these ways? I know there was also a lot of, you talked about crime. There was a lot of turmoil. Like that restaurant was open with your wife at the time. Like there was such upheaval. So even as you're going through regular, like everyday business work, life is still happening. It's not like life stops because you're struggling at your restaurant.
Totally.
No, I mean, first of all, the restaurant industry is hard enough. And then when you limit yourself to plant-based 20 years ago, then it's even harder. And then when you don't cook and remove the ventilation and the hoods from the kitchen, you're really taking a narrow approach. But I was like, and I had to give up a lot of the things that I took for granted in the previous iteration of my career. The media didn't cover us then. The Gourmet Magazine, Food and Wine, they used to call us about every holiday issue. Phone stopped ringing. We were not in the paper unless somebody said crazy vegan chef Matthew Kenney.
Oh, wow.
So I had to let go of that part of it, let go of the ego, and just, and that's how I knew I really loved it, because I kept wanting to do more, because I kept seeing breakthroughs with techniques and breakthroughs with new recipes. And it felt like this has to be shared. Every time I was on a plane and hit some bad turbulence, thought we might crash, I'd be thinking like, I still have so much to share, because I believed in it so much, because it did so much for myself and a lot of other people I know. But I went through, and our company went through everything: partnership issues, landlord issues, financial issues, legal, and still tried to keep elevating our product along the way. That was the most important thing. We were able to keep getting better and better in spite of that. Somehow we always just found a way. But there were days, weeks, months where, it was like, how are we going to survive? How are we going to stay in business? How are we going to cover payroll? How are we going to not get kicked out of this lease? And it finally started to turn when we opened on Abbott Kinney. We finally were on the right platform where we could reach a mainstream audience.
Yeah, it just feels right there. It's like the perfect spot. People get it. It's beautiful. An amazing experience. Matthew was just telling us that they're redoing it right now to incorporate a bar in the front, and it's so romantic in the back. I've been to so many events there. We've hosted events there. And then you've got your culinary school upstairs, which is on a new level.
Well, we had it upstairs when we opened it. We sold it in 2017. Now we have a really important component of our company up there. It's our test kitchen, MKTK. And that's really, like, I would say the last year we've started to go to completely new levels in terms of what we do with culinary. We have 4 or 5 extremely talented chefs up there, and they can literally do anything, almost anything. And it's just like a lab, and they're creating content for the new restaurants, for new projects we're involved in, for education, and having that think tank supported by all these, Michelin star background chefs from different backgrounds. They've, some have worked in Europe, some have worked in Asia, some in South America. All of them have really strong culinary backgrounds, and they don't run the restaurants day to day. They just create and implement. So having that is allowed us to really jump up several more steps.
Are some of those chefs on your new online course?
They are, most of them. And that's what I loved about doing an online platform, because in a classroom setting on site, I just read an article last week. It was one of the big culinary schools. Maybe it was Johnson and Wales, or one of them saying they didn't know what to do because they can't have classes now. And they couldn't translate it to virtual teaching because it just didn't translate. And I'm thinking the opposite. When you have an online academy, you can have the chefs who are the best at what they do. Chef Mike is incredible with pasta, and Justin's just a great technician overall. And Patrick is a pizza maestro. And so they can all be part of these different lessons so that they get the best instructor for each lesson possible. And that would never happen in a classroom.
Yeah. That's the way I feel about the online world, but people have to adjust to something new. It's a new concept, which I think is kind of what we're talking about in general. I'm reading this book right now. It's called Play Bigger. And it talks about these categories. And, it talks about how in the past, when people would start a company, they would think of like taking something that already exists and changing it a little bit, giving it their own twist, and then playing in that category. So that could be frozen foods, or it could be new printers, or the next laptop or microphone that we're holding, whatever that is, right? And they would just make a new version of it. But that now, especially because of internet, especially because of the speed at which information travels, the most successful brands and most successful companies actually do something different, which is actually create their own category. And I didn't even think about it before when I was saying this, but this idea of elevated vegan or raw food, I feel like is something that is pretty uniquely yours. It's like this idea of constantly trying to say, okay, we should eat this way, and that's great. But you don't have to just, I keep using this example, it's the clearest one in my head, but you don't have to just like munch on a carrot. Like that doesn't have to be all you eat. Cut up your cucumber into little like little sticks and little mini carrots and eat that all day, which is, I think that's still the way the vast majority of people think of vegan food is, well, what am I going to do all day? Just eat broccoli and cucumber. And this category of food, which is culinary vegan, right? This high-end, experiential,
artistic, creative,
artisanal sort of world it's in its own category. It's almost not even just vegan food. It's like a food category now.
And it's an experience, I think.
Well, I mean, when you go to Plant Food and Wine, it's, again, we've taken a bunch of people there. We've been there a bunch of times. It's like just going out to a really nice restaurant.
Yeah.
That's the experience you have in your head. You're not thinking to yourself at a time, oh, damn, okay, today we're going to eat vegan. That's not the thought that comes up.
Well, also, and then when you leave, for the most part, everyone has different bodies and different digestive systems. But when I leave somewhere like Plant Food and Wine, my stomach doesn't hurt. And I can eat everything I want. I can drink everything I want. Even the wine is like on a new level. Like everything feels good. And the next day I wake up alive and alert. And that's the thing that I fell in love with 15 years ago with raw food. When I was working at the juice bar in Hollywood, I fell in love with the way I felt. And then I followed that. And that's kind of what I do in life anyway, with work, with parenting, no matter what it is, I follow that feeling. But that's how I fell in love with foods, raw foods specifically, but superfoods, plant-based foods. It wasn't because of the category. It was how it made me feel.
Yeah. I mean, for me, on a personal level, that's exactly what happened to me. On a professional level, it was how I could see it down in the future. It wasn't so easy to get to where I could see, but
well, that's what happens, right? When you create your own category, what I'm hearing is it was like 10, 12 years of education. You literally had to do the footwork. Magazines weren't calling because they didn't understand it. You had to talk to people. You had to keep showing people that it's a way forward because nobody had done it before, so nobody understood it.
Yeah, even like running a restaurant in those days, like you could be running a French restaurant and ask, you can hire hundreds of chefs who can come and cook, poulet roti or whatever. But nobody could come into Pure Food and Wine in those days and be told, well, could you make me some cashew mozzarella or make me some macadamia ricotta? The techniques didn't exist.
Yeah.
So that's why we started a school. In part because we realized there needed to be a foundation. And that was a few years in. That was like 7 or 8 years into it.
I love it. I'm going to show you the book that I'm talking about because you should read the book. It'll make a lot of sense given the journey you've had. So I feel like now there is a category, at least. It exists. People understand that they can look for it. Do you find that it's still somewhat limited? Do you find that there are still pockets where people understand? You talked about trying to open up in Oklahoma and it didn't work. Kind of like, you saw where you were trying to go 15, 16 years ago, and you kind of feel like you're reaching that place, it sounds like, with plant food and wine. What are the next 10, 15 years like?
Well, in those days, like in Oklahoma, even though we could prepare some really great food, it was still only a few years into it. So the notes that we had to work with were pretty limited. It was similar to plant food and wine, pure food and wine. And, if I went to Oklahoma today, I would take a totally different approach. I do 00 because that concept can work anywhere. Or
Just a pizza.
Yeah. Pizza, not pizza, or I do a pasta concept or a burger concept. So I would know how to do that today. But in those days I didn't. But it's changed a lot. I mean, we're in Argentina and Brazil, Colombia, Mexico. Well, we haven't opened in Mexico yet, and Costa Rica. But Brazil, Argentina, Colombia are some of the largest per capita meat consuming countries in the world. Brazil is the largest meat exporter in the world. And yet our restaurant in Brazil, the day it opened, had the first 2 days it had 1,000 guests, and they had to close and reorganize because it was so busy.
Wow.
And when I go and do an event, I did a speaking event in Brazil a couple years ago. And if I do that in downtown LA, maybe, I don't know, 50, 100 people might come up. We sold out with over 400 people at this event in Brazil. So there's interest pretty much anywhere in the world now. There's a few exceptions, but surprisingly, it's really broad now. And I think that from here on is where the global, I use this term a lot, but the shift in the global food paradigm will take place over the next few years. And that doesn't mean people will stop eating meat or fish or dairy. But what it means to me is that the go-to cuisine, what we think of as our staple, and that includes restaurants and homes and so forth, will be plants. And then, those who have meat or fish, it's maybe 3 ounces of fish instead of a 20-ounce steak and a little piece of broccoli on the side.
Right up to now, the side has been the vegetables, etc. I come from Israel, and in Israel, without realizing it, because it is Mediterranean, etc., like veganism is huge by itself. But the idea of a lot of things that are made of vegetables and beans and things of that nature has just always been there. And meat has primarily been the add-on versus the other way around.
Yeah, I hear that a lot about Israel, actually. Everybody talks about how incredible the produce is and how many plant-based options there are. So can't wait to get there.
Yeah, it's
soon.
huge vegan population there. There's a lot of vegan restaurants, a lot of juice bars. It's really exciting when we go. They could definitely use some Matthew Kenney there.
We're talking about with a group there potentially doing 00
Cool.
first. Yeah.
Yeah, Tel Aviv would love that.
So is that, when I was asking kind of where things are going, is that what you're finding is taking over almost like subcategories with what I'm talking about? So like vegan pizza and making that a thing, so that, because everybody understands like having pizza, right? You don't have to educate them on that part.
Yeah, we've done that with a lot of different cuisines. We have Bar Verde, which is Mexican, and we have our food hall Plant City, which is our plant-based version of Italy. The next one will be a lot bigger.
Yum.
It's a big place. I mean, that first weekend, I think we served 8,000 people there. And we have Humble, which is a fast casual concept with burgers and fries. We're doing a drive-through. We just signed a lease for a drive-through in Costa Mesa.
What was the space before?
It's currently a Del Taco.
I
That's
love
amazing.
it. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Nobody is served by a Del Taco. I mean, you might feel okay while you're buying it, but then, oh my God, the pain you pay later on is incredible.
So it's the whole spectrum, like all drive-through grocery stores like New Delhi, but all the way up to like tasting menus. Like our new restaurant in Los Cabos is at one of the best hotels in Mexico, and it will be tasting menus only.
Sounds so good.
With this really cool wine room and cheese program, and it's right on the ocean. It's going to be amazing. So it's the whole spectrum. But I think of us as a content company more than a restaurant company. It's really about our product, not just the product itself, but the branding and everything about what encapsulates the product and the recipes. And restaurants, books, meal kits, products, education, those are ways that we distribute this product to different people around the world. So it's it's just we're lucky because there are with technology and with the global communities coming together, there are just so many directions we can go with this product. So restaurants were the first phase for us to really like make an imprint, and they're also a great way to develop new ideas and try them out on guests.
Yeah.
But once we've done that, now we're veering in a lot of different directions at the same time.
Do you have any fun projects or collaborations currently that you're excited about?
We have so many. Yeah. I mean, Food Future Institute just launched a few weeks ago,
Yes.
and we have, I think, close to 600 students, which is incredible. That's more than we had our entire first 3 years when we launched the first time. And seeing the work of these students is just incredibly gratifying, because sometimes their plates are better than the ones we prepared for the
That's
curriculum.
awesome.
And it's amazing to see that can work. But we have a lot of new restaurant projects. We're opening Bahia in San Francisco and Avivar in Los Cabos. Those are two of probably 15 or 20 restaurants, I guess, we're developing.
So cool.
And our work with L'Oreal, which is amazing, converting the Beverly Hills store of a 150-year-old French company into entirely plant-based when they didn't have a single plant-based option on their menu.
Wow.
So that's unheard of to do that. And we were thrilled because the sales went up like 30% over what they were doing before.
Oh, so that's already done.
Yeah, it's L'Oreal by MK. We launched
We'll have to go visit.
6 months ago, or back in September, I guess.
So cool.
And we're working on, we haven't announced it yet, but we're working on a new meal plan program that will be hopefully nationwide. And that's a really exciting project. We have a lot of collaborations around the world with different brands, Four Seasons Hotels. We're doing a big project in Aloe Yoga, who I know you're with Aloe Yoga. So we're excited about that. It's their new New York City flagship, and we're opening on the top floor of that building on Fifth Avenue.
That'll be a restaurant?
A restaurant, yeah,
Cool.
called Sutra.
Nice.
And we have an Ayurvedic inspired restaurant opening in Palm Beach called Air, AYRE. But yeah, I need a spreadsheet to remember all the projects.
No, that's incredible. How
I love it.
exciting.
I have a completely different set of questions, but I'll ask you those off air, because we talked about how, Plant Food and Wine is remodeling, and you now have a team in place that's just doing it, so you don't have to get, initially you were boots on the ground with everything. You can't do that when you got 40 restaurants and 15 in play. You just can't visit them constantly to do the work. So there's got to be this other layer of understanding the bigger concept of what you're trying to achieve, and then just making sure that all the projects adhere to that, all the collabs serve the greater purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I've just spent a lot of energy trying to, I repeat a lot of the same things about our narrative, our style, and that's always changing too. It's not just what's in my head. I mean, I have to listen to the global community. I have to look at trends and what's working. We've changed our branding a little bit over the years and our style dramatically. We used to basically put flowers on everything. Now we're kind of a little more minimalist. It's always changing depending on who we're working with. But it's still the same philosophy, non-processed ingredients and so forth. But yeah, it's just like when I started as a chef, I knew every single dish going out of the kitchen. I didn't leave the kitchen for a year in my first restaurant. And I could tell if the rosemary sprig wasn't going in the right direction. Eventually learned to let go of that when I stopped being in the kitchen every day. And the same thing with the restaurants. I mean, I hope that I can provide enough infrastructure so the company would continue with that, whether I'm here or not.
So amazing. I love it. It's inspiring. Again, it's really beautiful to see the end product, as you mentioned, of such a consistent and long effort for something that just wasn't there at all 20 years ago. It's really, really beautiful. And so we ask every single one of our guests the same 5 questions. This is people's favorite segment oftentimes. And the first one is, out of everything you've done, it doesn't have to do with what we've talked about here today, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, I think alignment, for me anyway, having alignment between what I do personally and professionally changed everything. Because when I was, prior to plant-based, I was eating one way, and food's something we do every day, several times a day. And I was eating one way and serving food in a totally different way. And I didn't have that alignment. So I didn't have that same connectivity and passion that I do now. So for me, I'm pretty extreme. I work a lot, but I need that. I need to have, total alignment with what I do for work. I know so many people who are very successful on a financial level, but don't love what they do. That's a hard way to get through the day.
Totally, absolutely. Normally, I end up seeing them because they're drinking a lot or doing a lot of drugs. So
trying to escape.
To deal with that.
Yeah, they're trying to
like on the other end.
escape or disappear or numb. And then what about your proudest moment to date?
I think it's when I see our students. I mean, there have been multiple times over the years, but when I see our students, producing this incredible food, it's not that I'm just proud of them. I'm proud of our team for delineating that information and finding the ways to implement technology to create that. But seeing student work gives me so much satisfaction.
I love that.
Beautiful. I love it.
What about on the flip side of that? What's been one of your most challenging or difficult moments?
Depends on the day. There's one every day. Wow. I think, probably, that's a tough one. I've had so many. I would say probably, being in Oklahoma, like I hadn't left New York for 20 years. And that was the first time I wasn't living there per se, but I was spending most of my time there. And, being unplugged from New York and from my friends and in a place where I just, no matter what I tried to do, couldn't really make it click. There were moments where it did, but that was a really tough period. And it was kind of like working in, what's it called? Working in obscurity for a while.
Yeah.
So I felt like I was kind of disconnected for a while, not from the work, but from the world.
Yeah, you were. What about any self-care, like daily? I'm sure it changes, but is there something that just brings you back to that alignment?
I've gotten a lot more into it in the last year. I tend to get extreme with my work hours, but recently I built a gym in my garage, so I have a yoga, place to do yoga, but also a gym for weights. And I've been playing tennis and I run and I do all sorts of different physical things. And I think that's really important, especially for someone my age that works too much and has a lot of stress. And I have multiple self-care things. I mean, I change my supplements a lot. It's, I forget the name of it, but it's this like seawater, these little glass capsules, you break the top off, super hydrating. So I've been taking a lot of those and, using a lot of tinctures lately, which I never really was into tinctures. And a lot of amino acids, because I found like as I get in my mid 50s, so I found that, maintaining bone density, muscle mass is different at 55 than it is at 35. So I've been using a lot of really high quality aminos and things like that to, try to keep focusing on longevity. Can't take it for as granted as much as I used to.
Totally.
Yeah, no doubt. This podcast is called Ignited. What gets you ignited?
New projects, always. That's I get really excited every time we take on a new project, assuming we're taking it on because we're passionate about it and not just an extension of our business.
I love it.
Beautiful.
That's so great. And we can see how much you like new project by seeing how many things are left standing, which
could
is beautiful.
Be considered a disease too.
Yeah. We mirror that.
Trust me, I know that world. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing this incredible story. We will obviously share links to the school, to the restaurants, and the books and everything else, so that people who maybe weren't aware of you before, will get to partake now.
It's a pleasure. You guys are great together on here. Thank you.
Thank you. An honor. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.